Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something that affects every single one of us. We're decoding the laws that govern your daily lifeline. You know, the petrol in your car, the food on your table, the essentials that keep life moving.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Have you ever been at a ration shop and had that nagging feeling you were being shortchanged? Or maybe you've worried about a new petrol pump popping up way too close for comfort. Well, guess what? You're not powerless. There's actually a pretty strong legal framework designed to protect you, and we're about to break it all down. So, where do all these protections even come from? Well, the foundation, the real bedrock, is a law from back in 1955 called the Essential Commodities Act, or the ECA. It was created with one clear mission: to make sure everybody gets these vital goods fairly, at the right price, and to protect all of us from stuff like hoarding and black marketing. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is an essential commodity? Well, it's not some list carved in stone. It's dynamic. The government can declare pretty much any item essential if the public need is there. I mean, think back to the pandemic. That's a perfect example. Masks and hand sanitizers were suddenly added to the list to stop prices from going through the roof and to make sure they were actually available. And this is where it gets really interesting. The law works on two levels. First, you have these broad categories the government can legally control, things like drugs and petrol. But then there's a more active, shorter list of stuff, like onions, dal, and potatoes, that a special government cell is watching every single day, looking for any sudden painful price jumps. Now, back in 2020, this whole system faced a huge, and I mean huge, shakeup. A very controversial amendment was passed that tried to flip the entire philosophy of the law. It basically wanted to move away from the old idea of state control, which made sense in an era of scarcity, and move towards letting the market run free. Arguing that India now has a food surplus, man, did that ignite a massive national debate. And this chart here shows exactly why people were so worried. The amendment said the government could only step in after some, frankly, insane price hikes. For stuff like onions, the price would have to literally double, 100% increase. For things like pulses, a 50% hike. Critics were screaming that these triggers were so high they'd almost never be hit, leaving all of us totally exposed. Okay, so enough with the theory. Let's see how this all plays out in the real world through actual court cases. We're going to look at 3 places that affect millions of us every single day: petrol pumps, ration shops, and you guessed it, gas godowns. Here's a super critical legal point. Let's say you're upset about a new petrol pump being built too close to a school. You go online and you find some official guidelines that say it shouldn't be there. Well, the courts have said time and time again that guidelines are just that, recommendations. They are not the same as a binding law. So if that pump has all its legal permits, breaking a guideline alone probably won't be enough to stop it. And what about a new gas godown? The Calcutta High Court made something very clear. You can't just use one of the High Court's most powerful tools, a writ petition, to solve a private land dispute. That's what civil courts are for. A writ is specifically for when you're challenging the actions of a public authority. For example, arguing that the whole selection process for that godown was rigged or illegal. Now, when it comes to ration shops, which are a lifeline for so many, the courts have laid down some really important ground rules. First, just filing a police complaint against a dealer isn't enough to yank their license. There has to be a proper independent inquiry. Second, if a license does get canceled, just filing an appeal doesn't automatically put everything on hold. And third, and this is a big one, courts can absolutely review and even overturn a decision made by a top minister if they think it's just plain wrong or arbitrary. And here is a jaw-dropping, real-world example of that power. In Maharashtra, a state minister went ahead and restored the license of a ration shop dealer who had already been found guilty of malpractice. The Bombay High Court stepped in, threw out the minister's order, and used incredibly strong language saying the minister had failed in his duties. It's just a powerful reminder that in the end, no one is above the law. Okay, so you've seen the principles, you've seen the court cases, but what can you actually do if you're facing a problem? All right, let's get you set up with a practical legal toolkit. Here is your 3-step game plan. And listen, the order here is absolutely critical. You always start with step 1, a formal written complaint to the right authority. This creates an official paper trail. If they ignore you or act illegally, then you can escalate to step 2 and file that writ petition for your personal case. And if the problem is bigger than just you, if it's affecting your whole neighborhood or district, that's when you bring out the big gun. Step 3, a public interest litigation.
And you've got to choose the right tool for the job. A writ petition is personal. It's for when your specific rights have been violated. Say your ration shop license was unfairly canceled. A public interest litigation, or a PIL, that's for a public problem. It's when an entire system is broken for a whole community. Any public-spirited citizen can file one to try and get a fix for everyone.
All right, let's pull all of this together. After everything we've gone through, what is the one single, most important thing you should take away from all this? Okay, let's lock this in. First, you have a right to get the correct quantity and quality of goods at the right price. Period. To make a complaint that actually works, it needs to be specific, in writing, and backed up with evidence. Remember that crucial difference between a simple guideline and a real binding law. And above all, never forget that the courts are there as a powerful check on everyone else. The law gives you these tools, but they only have power if you know about them and are ready to use them. And that brings us to a final, pretty big question. We've seen that the law provides this incredible toolkit for citizens to hold power accountable, but is it really enough? What more needs to be done to close that gap between a right existing on paper and a person being able to actually, truly enforce it on the ground? How do we make that power genuinely accessible to every single person in this country?